A blood-curdling scream tore through the early morning silence of Copper Creek as Zara Daniels stumbled out of Widow Marsh's boarding house, tears streaming down her face, her honey-blonde hair tumbling loose from its pins. The year was 1875, and in a town where whispers traveled faster than the twice-weekly stagecoach, Zara's reputation had just been shredded to pieces by the most devastating rumor a single woman could face. "I am not with child." She cried, her voice breaking as several townspeople turned to stare, some with undisguised contempt, others with morbid curiosity. It's a lie. At 22, Zara had always been considered a respectable young woman. The daughter of the late doctor, she'd been working as the town's schoolteacher for the past 3 years since her father's passing. She had lived a quiet life in Copper Creek, Colorado Territory, saving what little she earned and keeping mostly to herself. But now, with a few choice words from Eliza Marsh, the most notorious gossip in 3 counties, Zara's carefully constructed life was crumbling around her. "No decent establishment will have you now," Eliza called from the doorway, her thin lips curved in a cruel smile. "Not in your condition." Zara whirled around, her blue eyes blazing. "There is no condition. You're spreading falsehoods because I refuse to marry your nephew." A small crowd had gathered on Main Street now, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Sheriff Thomas, who approached with a concerned frown. "Miss Daniels, perhaps she should leave town," Eliza interrupted. "We don't need her kind influencing the children." Zara felt her world spinning. The school, her students. How would she face them now? How would she face their parents? In 1875, a woman with a child and no husband was as good as dead in the eyes of proper society. "I've done nothing wrong," Zara insisted, but her voice had lost its strength. "Then who's the father?" someone called from the crowd. Before Zara could respond, a deep voice cut through the murmurs. "If she carries, it's mine." The crowd parted as Jackson Flint strode forward, his spurs jingling with each confident step. At 28, he was the most successful rancher in the territory, with land that stretched farther than the eye could see and a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. His dark hair curled beneath the brim of his Stetson, and his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, were fixed on Zara. She gaped at him in shock. They had barely exchanged more than pleasantries in the 3 years she'd lived in town. "What was he doing, Mr. Flint?" Sheriff Thomas said, clearly surprised. "Are you saying I'm saying that Miss Daniels' honor is not to be questioned?" Jackson stated firmly. "And if there's a child, which I highly doubt given the source of the rumor," he cast a cold glance at Eliza, "then I take full responsibility." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. Jackson Flint, the man every unmarried woman in 3 territories had set her cap for, was claiming paternity of a non-existent child. "Mr. Flint," she began, her voice low and urgent. "I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not. We'll discuss this privately," he interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. He offered his arm to her, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Together, they walked away from the stunned crowd, leaving whispers in their wake. "Have you lost your mind?" Zara hissed once they were out of earshot. "Why would you say such a thing?" Jackson's expression remained impassive as he guided her toward his waiting horse. "Because Eliza Marsh is a venomous snake who's been trying to run this town since her husband died. She spreads lies about anyone who crosses her, and clearly you've crossed her." "By refusing to marry her drunken nephew," Zara exclaimed, then lowered her voice. "But that doesn't explain why you would involve yourself." Jackson stopped and turned to face her. For the first time, Zara noticed the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the way his jaw clenched as if he were wrestling with his words. "My sister found herself in a similar situation years ago." No one stood up for her. His voice was tight. "I won't see another woman driven out of town by lies." Zara felt a lump form in her throat. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Flint, but you've just tied your reputation to mine, and for what? A woman you barely know." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps it's time I got to know you better, Miss Daniels." With that, he helped her onto his horse and mounted behind her. As they rode out of town, Zara couldn't help but wonder if she had just been rescued or if she had jumped from one fire into another. Jackson's ranch lay 10 miles outside of Copper Creek, a sprawling property that testified to his success. The main house was impressive by frontier standards, 2 stories of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around it. As they approached, several ranch hands paused in their work to stare curiously at the schoolteacher riding double with their boss. "They'll talk," Zara murmured, acutely aware of Jackson's chest against her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. "Let them," he replied simply. "My foreman's wife is inside. You'll have a proper chaperone." True to his word, Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted them at the door. Her surprise at seeing Zara was evident, but she recovered quickly. "Miss Daniels needs somewhere to stay for a few days," Jackson explained, removing his hat as they stepped inside. "I trust you can make her comfortable in the guest room." "Of course, Mr. Flint," Mrs. Rodriguez replied with a warm smile at Zara. "Come, dear, let's get you settled." Once Zara had been shown to a spacious bedroom upstairs, Mrs. Rodriguez left her with a promise of tea. Zara sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind reeling from the morning's events. Just hours ago, she had been preparing for another day of teaching. Now she was a guest in Jackson Flint's home, with her reputation in tatters and her future uncertain. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Jackson stood there, hat in hand, his expression unreadable. "May I come in?" "The door will remain open, of course." Zara nodded, sitting up straighter. "I've sent word to the school board explaining that you're unwell and will need a few days' leave," he said, remaining near the doorway. "I've also instructed my lawyer to look into legal action against Mrs. Marsh for slander." Zara's eyes widened. "That's very generous of you, Mr. Flint, but I don't understand why you're going to such lengths for me." Jackson was silent for a moment, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "The truth is, Miss Daniels, I've observed you these past 3 years. You teach children others have given up on. You visit the elderly who have no family. You work harder than anyone in that town, and you ask for nothing in return." He paused. "People like you are rare in these parts." Zara felt warmth creep into her cheeks. "You've been watching me," a corner of his mouth lifted. "It's a small town, and I make it my business to know who's in it." He cleared his throat. "Now we need to discuss our next steps." "Next steps?" "Yes, the rumor about your condition will not simply disappear. We need to address it." Zara stood, pacing to the window. "But there is no condition to address. I'm not with child. I've never even," she broke off, mortified. "I'm aware," Jackson said quietly. "But Eliza Marsh has planted the seed of doubt. In a month or two, when no evidence of a child appears, she'll simply claim you lost it or that she was mistaken. By then, the damage will be done. Your reputation will remain tarnished." "So what do you suggest?" Zara asked, turning to face him. Jackson met her gaze steadily. "I suggest we marry." Zara thought she must have misheard him. "I beg your pardon." "It's the most logical solution," he continued, as if proposing a business arrangement. "We marry quickly, citing a long-standing secret attachment. In a few months, we announce that there was never a child, or perhaps that there was a miscarriage. Either way, your reputation is preserved and life continues." "Life continues," Zara echoed incredulously. "Mr. Flint, marriage is not something to enter into lightly. It's a lifelong commitment." "I'm aware of that," he replied calmly, "and I'm prepared to honor that commitment." Zara stared at him, trying to make sense of his offer. "Why? Why would you bind yourself to a woman you hardly know?" Jackson's expression softened slightly. "I know enough, Miss Daniels, and I believe we could build a good life together, given the chance. But what about love?" The word felt foolish on her lips, a schoolgirl's fantasy in the face of such practicality. "Love often grows from respect and shared purpose," he answered. "I respect you greatly, Miss Daniels. The rest may follow." Zara turned back to the window, her thoughts in turmoil. Marriage to Jackson Flint would certainly solve her immediate problems. She would be protected by his name and wealth. She would never have to worry about keeping a roof over her head again, but to marry a virtual stranger. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Jackson replied. "Take the day, but remember, the longer we wait, the more the rumors will spread." He moved toward the door. "I'll be in my study if you have questions." After he left, Zara sat by the window for hours, watching the activity of the ranch below. Ranch hands moved cattle from one pasture to another. A wagon arrived with supplies. Life continued, orderly and purposeful, under Jackson Flint's direction. Would her life have that same order if she accepted his proposal? Mrs. Rodriguez brought lunch on a tray, her kind eyes full of unasked questions. Zara ate little, her stomach too tied in knots to accommodate much food. As the afternoon waned, she found herself drawn downstairs, her feet carrying her toward the study where Jackson had said he would be. The door was ajar, and she could see him sitting at a large desk, papers spread before him. He looked up as if sensing her presence. "Miss Daniels," he said, standing immediately. "Please come in." Zara entered the study, noting the walls lined with books, more books than she would have expected a rancher to own. "You read," she observed. A smile touched his lips. "I do. My mother was insistent that her children be educated, even out here. You mentioned a sister." "Yes, Caroline. She lives in Denver now with her husband and children." His expression clouded. "After what happened to her, my father sent her east to live with relatives. She only returned to the territory 5 years ago." Zara's heart ached for the unknown Caroline. What happened to the man who, to her child's father? Jackson's jaw tightened. He denied everything, called her terrible names. The town believed him over her. He looked directly at Zara. "That's why I stepped in today. I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself." Zara moved closer to the desk. "Mr. Flint Jackson," he corrected her. "If we're to be married, you should use my given name." "If," Zara emphasized. "I haven't agreed yet, but you're considering it." "It wasn't a question," Zara sighed. "Yes, I'm considering it, but I need to understand what such a marriage would entail. Would I continue teaching? Would I have a say in household matters? Would you expect certain things?" She blushed at her own implication. Jackson regarded her thoughtfully. "You may continue teaching if you wish, though it's not necessary. You would be mistress of this house in every respect. As for—" He cleared his throat. "I would hope for a true marriage in time, but I would never force the issue. We would progress at a pace that feels right for both of us." His words were reasonable, even generous, yet Zara still hesitated. "And what if, after some time, we find we cannot tolerate each other? Then we would make the best of it, as many couples do," he replied honestly. "But I don't think it will come to that. You seem very confident." "I've built this ranch from nothing, Miss Daniels. I don't enter into ventures I believe will fail." There was something reassuring about his confidence, Zara had to admit. And what were her alternatives? Return to town and face the whispers, the stares, possibly lose her position at the school. Leave Copper Creek and start over somewhere else, alone and without references. "If I agree," she said slowly, "I would want a proper courtship first, even if it's brief. I won't rush to the altar like a woman with something to hide." Jackson nodded. 2 weeks. "We court openly, announce our engagement, and marry before the month is out. That should satisfy propriety while addressing the rumors. And you're certain you want this? Marriage to a woman whose reputation is already questioned?" "I'm certain I want you," Jackson said simply, his words sending an unexpected flutter through Zara's chest. She took a deep breath. "Then yes, Mr. F.L. Jackson, I accept your proposal." The next morning, Zara woke to find a dress laid out for her, a lovely blue gown that complemented her eyes perfectly. A note from Mrs. Rodriguez explained that it had belonged to Jackson's sister, who was of similar size, and that Jackson thought Zara might like something fresh to wear for their return to town. The gesture touched her. As she dressed, Zara couldn't help but wonder what kind of man Jackson Flint really was. Behind the successful rancher and the commanding presence, there seemed to be thoughtfulness and depth she hadn't expected. Jackson was waiting for her downstairs, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. Seeing him thus attired, Zara was struck anew by his handsome features, the strong line of his jaw, the intelligence in his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, his gaze appreciative but respectful. "Thank you," she replied, smoothing the skirt of the borrowed dress. "And thank you for the loan." "It's lovely. It suits you." He offered his arm. "Are you ready? We'll take the buggy into town." The ride to Copper Creek was filled with Jackson educating Zara about his ranch operations, his plans for expansion, and his ideas for improving cattle breeding. It was clearly a subject he was passionate about, and Zara found herself genuinely interested, asking questions that seemed to please him. Most women's eyes glaze over when I discuss ranch matters, he admitted with a rueful smile. Well, if I'm to be a rancher's wife, I should understand what that entails, Zara replied practically. Jackson glanced at her, something warm in his gaze. Yes, you should. As they approached town, Zara's nervousness returned. What will we tell people? The truth, with some adjustments, Jackson replied. That we've been acquainted for some time, have developed an attachment, and have decided to marry. Eliza's rumor simply forced us to make our intentions public sooner than planned. And the supposed child. We'll neither confirm nor deny it explicitly. Let people draw their own conclusions. In time, the truth will be evident. Zara nodded, straightening her shoulders as they rolled down Main Street. As expected, their arrival drew attention. Jackson helped her down from the buggy with careful courtesy, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. Remember, he murmured, you have nothing to be ashamed of. With those words bolstering her courage, Zara walked beside Jackson into the general store, where they knew Mrs. Peterson. The owner's wife and another notorious gossip would spread word of their appearance together. Mr. Flint, Miss Daniels. Mrs. Peterson exclaimed, her eyes wide with curiosity. What a surprise to see you both. Good morning, Mrs. Peterson, Jackson replied pleasantly. Miss Daniels and I need a few supplies. We're planning a dinner at the ranch this weekend to announce our engagement officially. The shopkeeper's wife nearly dropped the bolt of fabric she was holding. Engagement, my goodness, Zara managed a smile. Yes, we've been courting discreetly for some time. Recent events have prompted us to make our relationship public sooner than we intended. I see, Mrs. Peterson nodded vigorously, already mentally composing the gossip she would share. Well, congratulations to you both. When's the happy day to be? Within the month, Jackson answered, his hand coming to rest at the small of Zara's back. We see no reason to delay our happiness. By the time they left the store, having ordered invitations for their engagement dinner, Zara could practically hear the whispers racing through town. Jackson seemed unperturbed, leading her next to the school. I thought you might want to check on your classroom and speak with the school board president, he explained. Show them you have nothing to hide. Mr. Williams, the board president, was indeed at the schoolhouse, looking uncomfortable as they entered. Miss Daniels, Mr. Flint, he greeted them, adjusting his spectacles nervously. I wasn't expecting you today. I wanted to personally inform you of our engagement, Jackson said, his tone making it clear that he expected congratulations rather than judgment. Engagement. Mr. Williams echoed, visibly relieved. Well, that's wonderful news. Congratulations to you both. Thank you, Zara said, finding her voice. I hope to return to teaching on Monday if that's acceptable. Of course, Mr. Williams assured her quickly. The children have missed you. After a brief discussion about school matters, they took their leave. Their next stop was the church, where they spoke with Reverend Miller about performing their wedding ceremony in 3 weeks' time. The Reverend seemed surprised but pleased, having always thought well of both Jackson and Zara. By midday, they had made a sufficient circuit of the town to ensure that their news would be the primary topic of conversation for days to come. As they prepared to return to the ranch, a familiar voice called out. Well, if it isn't the happy couple, Eliza Marsh approached, her expression a mixture of disbelief and calculation. I must say, this is quite the convenient arrangement, a hasty marriage to cover a delicate situation. Jackson's expression hardened. Mrs. Marsh, I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully. My lawyer is already preparing documents regarding your slanderous statements about Miss Daniels. Eliza blanched slightly but rallied. Slander. I merely expressed concern for a young woman in difficult circumstances. You spread malicious lies, Zara said quietly but firmly. And you did so because I refused to marry your nephew. That speaks to your character, not mine. Several townspeople had stopped to listen, and Zara could see from their expressions that her words had struck home. Eliza Marsh was not well liked, merely feared for her sharp tongue and influence. Mr. Flint and I have been courting privately for some time, Zara continued, finding strength in Jackson's supportive presence beside her. We had planned to announce our engagement when the time was right. Your false rumors simply hastened our timeline. Jackson placed a protective arm around Zara's shoulders. I suggest you find a new hobby, Mrs. Marsh. Spreading lies about my future wife will not end well for you. With that, he guided Zara back to the buggy, leaving Eliza sputtering behind them. As they drove out of town, Zara finally allowed herself to relax. "Thank you," she said softly, "for standing by me." Jackson's expression softened as he looked at her. "Always," he replied, and for the first time, Zara wondered if perhaps this marriage of convenience might become something more. The 2 weeks of their official courtship passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jackson called on Zara daily, bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers gathered from the range, a handcrafted wooden box for her teaching supplies. They took drives in his buggy, walked through town together, and attended Sunday services side by side. To all appearances, they were a couple deeply in love. Zara returned to teaching, facing her students with renewed confidence. Most parents had accepted Jackson's public support as proof of her innocence, and those who still harbored doubts kept their opinions to themselves, unwilling to cross the powerful rancher. For her part, Zara found herself genuinely enjoying Jackson's company. He was intelligent, well-read despite his frontier upbringing, and possessed a dry wit that often caught her by surprise. He listened when she spoke of her students or her ideas for improving the school, offering thoughtful comments rather than dismissing her concerns as many men might have. The engagement dinner at the ranch was a grand affair, with the town's leading citizens in attendance. Jackson had spared no expense, bringing in a chef from Denver and decorating the house with flowers and candles. Zara wore a new dress he had insisted on purchasing for her, a deep green silk that made her feel more beautiful than she ever had before. "You look stunning," Jackson whispered as he helped her greet their guests. The warmth in his eyes made her wonder how much of their courtship was still pretense. Even Eliza Marsh had received an invitation, though she had declined to attend, claiming a prior engagement. Her absence was noted but not mourned by the other guests, who seemed genuinely happy for the couple. As the evening progressed, Jackson raised a toast to his bride-to-be. "To Zara," he said, his deep voice carrying across the room, "whose kindness, intelligence, and beauty have captured my heart completely. I am the luckiest of men." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Zara's eyes. Standing there, surrounded by well-wishers, she realized with a start that she was falling in love with Jackson Flint. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience was transforming into something real, at least on her part. Whether Jackson felt the same remained unclear. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house had quieted, Jackson found Zara on the porch, gazing up at the stars. "Was the evening to your liking?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "It was perfect," she replied honestly. "Thank you for all of it. It was my pleasure." He hesitated, then added, "Zara, there's something I should tell you before our wedding." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes, when I claimed the child might be mine, I acted on instinct. I wanted to protect you." He turned to face her fully. "But the truth is, I had noticed you long before that day. From the first time I saw you teaching those children under the oak tree when the schoolhouse roof was being repaired, I was drawn to you." Zara's breath caught. "You never said anything." "What would I have said? Miss Daniels, I admire the way you handle arithmetic with 8-year-olds. His self-deprecating smile made her heart flutter. "I'm not a man of many words. I express myself through actions." "Like offering to marry a woman facing scandal," Zara murmured. "Like offering to marry a woman I have admired from afar for 3 years, he corrected gently. "Eliza's vicious rumor gave me the opening I needed, though I would have preferred to court you properly from the start." Zara searched his face, scarcely daring to believe what she was hearing. "Are you saying that you have feelings for me? That this isn't just an arrangement of convenience?" Jackson reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm saying that I care for you deeply, Zara, more than I expected to care for anyone. If you still want to proceed with our marriage, I promise to do everything in my power to make you happy." It wasn't quite a declaration of love, but it was enough, more than enough for now. Zara felt tears of relief and happiness well in her eyes. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, they've meant more to me than I can express." Jackson's smile was like the sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Zara responded, her heart soaring as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "3 more days," he murmured. "3 more days until I can call you my wife." 3 more days, Zara echoed, no longer dreading her wedding day but eagerly anticipating it. The wedding was held in the small church of Copper Creek, decorated with wildflowers and ribbons by Zara's students, who were thrilled to see their beloved teacher marry the richest man in the territory. Zara wore a simple but elegant white gown, with lace that Jackson had ordered specially from St. Louis. Her hair was adorned with tiny white blossoms, and she carried a bouquet of prairie flowers. Jackson waited at the altar, looking more nervous than Zara had ever seen him. But when she appeared at the church doors, his face transformed with such joy and wonder that several of the ladies in attendance sighed audibly. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows written in their own hands, promises not just of fidelity and support but of growing together, building a life based on mutual respect and deepening affection. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson's kiss was tender but held a promise of passion to come. The reception was held at the schoolhouse, transformed for the occasion with garlands and lanterns. Children darted between the adults, stealing sweets and laughing. Music from a fiddle and piano filled the air as couples danced. Zara and Jackson moved together in perfect harmony, his hand warm and steady at her waist. "Happy Mrs. Flint," he murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. The name sent a thrill through her. "Very," she replied, meeting his gaze. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." His eyes darkened slightly. "Though I'll be happier still when we can leave this gathering." Zara blushed, understanding his meaning. Despite her earlier nervousness about the physical aspect of marriage, she now found herself anticipating it with equal parts excitement and trepidation. As the evening wound down and they prepared to depart for the ranch, their home, now Zara was surprised to find herself approached by Eliza Marsh, who had attended the ceremony but remained on the periphery of the celebration. "Mrs. Flint," Eliza said stiffly, "I wish to offer my congratulations." Zara regarded her warily. "Thank you, Mrs. Marsh." The older woman hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I may have been hasty in my assumptions about your condition." It was as close to an apology as Eliza Marsh would ever come. Zara, feeling magnanimous in her happiness, simply nodded. "We all make mistakes, Mrs. Marsh. I hope we can put this behind us." Relief flashed across Eliza's face before she composed herself. "Indeed. Well, good evening to you both." As she walked away, Jackson squeezed Zara's hand. "That was generous of you." "It's our wedding day," Zara replied with a smile. "I can afford to be generous." They left amid cheers and well wishes, rice showering down upon them as they climbed into the decorated buggy. Jackson took the reins and they set off toward the ranch, toward their future together. The journey was quiet, both lost in their thoughts as the reality of their marriage settled around them. When they arrived, Jackson surprised Zara by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Flint," he said softly, setting her down in the entryway. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared the master bedroom for them, with fresh linens and flowers, before discreetly retiring to her own quarters in a separate wing of the house. Jackson led Zara upstairs, both suddenly shy despite the growing intimacy of the past weeks. "I'll give you some privacy," he said, gesturing to the connecting dressing room. "Take whatever time you need." Alone in the dressing room, Zara changed into the nightgown she had purchased for this night, a confection of white cotton and lace, modest yet prettier than anything she had owned before. She brushed out her long hair and took a deep breath to steady her nerves before returning to the bedroom. Jackson had removed his jacket and vest but was otherwise still dressed. He turned as she entered, and the look in his eyes, admiration, desire, and something deeper, calmed her anxieties. You are beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. She moved toward him, summoning her courage. I'm a bit nervous. His expression softened. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Zara. I meant what I said. We can take our time. Zara shook her head. I don't want to wait. I've never. I know. He took her hands in his. I'll be gentle. And if at any point you want to stop, just say so. His consideration touched her deeply. I trust you, Jackson. Those words seemed to affect him profoundly. He raised her hands to his lips, kissing each one softly. I will try every day to be worthy of that trust. What followed was a night of tender discovery. True to his word, Jackson was gentle, patient, guiding her through unfamiliar territory with care and reverence. There was discomfort, yes, but it was overshadowed by the connection they forged, by the way he whispered her name like a prayer, by the feeling of being completely known and accepted. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Zara's head on his chest and his arm around her shoulders, she felt a contentment she had never known before. Jackson, she whispered, uncertain if he was still awake. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Thank you for standing up for me that day, for saying what you did. He was quiet for a moment, then shifted to look into her eyes. I think I've been waiting my whole life to find you, Zara. I just didn't know it until that moment. The words washed over her like a blessing. I love you, she said, the declaration rising from her heart with absolute certainty. Jackson's breath caught. For a heartbeat, Zara feared she had spoken too soon. Then his arms tightened around her, and he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that conveyed everything he felt. I love you too, he murmured against her mouth. More than I have words to express. As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Zara marveled at how a false rumor meant to destroy her had instead led her to true happiness. Sometimes it seemed, life's cruelest moments could open the door to its greatest joys. 3 months into their marriage, Zara and Jackson had settled into a rhythm that suited them both. She had continued teaching, riding to town with Jackson each morning and returning with him in the afternoon. The students adored their teacher's handsome husband, who occasionally joined their lessons to explain ranching techniques or share stories of the early days of the territory. The rumors about Zara's condition had naturally subsided when no evidence of pregnancy appeared. Some speculated that she had lost the child. Others concluded that Eliza's rumor had been false from the start. Either way, the matter was largely forgotten as the town focused on more pressing gossip. Zara had taken to ranch life with unexpected enthusiasm. She learned to ride better, to identify the various grasses that fed the cattle, even to help with simple veterinary tasks. Jackson, in turn, had become involved with the school, donating funds for new books and supplies and offering to build an addition to accommodate the growing number of students. They complemented each other, perfectly, his quiet strength balancing her outspoken nature, her warmth softening his reserve. And if the townsfolk noticed how the stern rancher's eyes followed his young wife with undisguised adoration, or how Zara's face lit up whenever Jackson entered a room, no one remarked upon it, except to note what a fortunate match they had made. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and purple, Zara turned to her husband with a smile that held a secret. I have something to tell you, she said, taking his hand and placing it gently over her abdomen. It seems that Mrs. Marsh's rumor was simply premature. Jackson's expression shifted from confusion to wonder as her meaning became clear. You're with child, truly? Zara nodded, her eyes shining. Dr. Bennett confirmed it yesterday. We're to become parents in the spring. With a joyful laugh, Jackson lifted her from her chair and spun her around, heedless of the ranch hands who might see their employer's uncharacteristic display. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. A child, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Our child. The irony isn't lost on me, Zara said with a wry smile. That after all the gossip about a non-existent pregnancy, I now find myself genuinely expecting. Jackson's hand returned to her still flat stomach, protective and reverent. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. He paused, his expression growing serious. Are you happy about this, Zara? Truly, her heart swelled with love for this man who always considered her feelings first. I am beyond happy, she assured him. I cannot imagine a greater joy than having a child with you, raising a family in this home we've built together. His answering smile was radiant. Nor can I. He drew her close, resting his chin atop her head. When shall we tell the town? Soon, Zara replied. Though I admit I'm looking forward to seeing Eliza Marsh's face when she realizes that her false rumor has come true after all. Jackson chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her cheek. Perhaps we should send her a special announcement. Jackson. Zara pretended to be scandalized but couldn't suppress her laughter. That would be petty. Deliciously so, he agreed, kissing the top of her head. But you're right. We're above such things now. They fell silent, content in each other's arms as they watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Zara thought about the journey that had brought them here from a public accusation to a marriage of convenience to this deep, abiding love that grew stronger with each passing day. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked softly, noticing her pensive expression. "I'm thinking that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as its greatest challenges," she replied. "If Eliza hadn't spread that terrible rumor, we would have found our way to each other eventually," Jackson finished confidently. "I was already working up the courage to call on you properly." "Were you really?" Zara looked up at him, surprised. "I had a whole speech prepared. I'd been practicing it for weeks." His sheepish admission made her heart flutter. "What did this speech entail?" she asked, curious. Jackson cleared his throat. "It began with, Miss Daniels, I've admired your intelligence and compassion from afar, and I would be honored if you would allow me to court you properly. Then it went on for quite some time about your many virtues, and my hope that you might one day consider me worthy of your affection." Zara's eyes softened. "I would have said yes immediately. Would you?" His expression was half teasing, half serious. Even to the gruff rancher who rarely came to town and scowled more often than he smiled. "Especially to him," Zara replied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Because I had noticed him too, watching me teach, helping elderly Mrs. Grayson with her purchases at the general store, defending the Chinese laundry workers when others mistreated them. I saw the good man beneath the stern exterior." Jackson caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "How did I get so fortunate?" "We both did," Zara corrected, leaning up to kiss him properly. As the first cool breeze of evening swept across the porch, they moved inside, arms around each other's waists, already discussing names for their child and plans for the nursery. The false rumor that had once threatened to destroy Zara's life had instead given her everything she could have wished for: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and now a child on the way. Life in the Wild West was uncertain at best, often harsh and rarely fair. But sometimes, just sometimes, it offered second chances and happy endings to those brave enough to seize them. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and new growth across the rolling plains surrounding Copper Creek. The mountains still wore caps of snow, but the valleys had awakened from their winter slumber, dotted with calves and colts taking their first wobbly steps into the world. At the Flint Ranch, preparations for another new life were well underway. The nursery, adjacent to the master bedroom, had been painted a cheerful yellow at Zara's request. Jackson had crafted a cradle with his own hands, working late into the night for weeks to ensure every detail was perfect. Mrs. Rodriguez had sewn tiny garments and blankets, while gifts from townsfolk, many from Zara's students, and their families arrived daily. Zara's condition was now obvious to all, her slender frame transformed by the life growing within her. She had reluctantly given up teaching as her time drew near, promising her disappointed students that she would return in the fall, perhaps with a little helper in tow. Jackson had grown even more protective, if such a thing were possible. He insisted on accompanying Zara everywhere, adjusted her pillows countless times each evening, and read every book on childbirth he could find, much to Dr. Bennett's amusement. "If all fathers were as concerned as your husband," the doctor had told Zara during her last checkup, "my job would be much easier." On a particularly beautiful April morning, As Zara sat in the garden Jackson had planted for her, enjoying the sunshine and the scent of lilacs, she felt the first twinge of discomfort. Having been warned what to expect, she didn't panic, simply noting the time and continuing to knit the tiny cap she was working on. When the second pain came, stronger than the first, she set aside her knitting and called for Mrs. Rodriguez, who immediately sent a ranch hand galloping for Jackson and another for the doctor in town. Jackson arrived in record time, his face pale with worry. "Is it time? Are you well? Should I carry you upstairs?" Zara couldn't help but smile despite her discomfort. "Yes, I'm fine and not yet. The pains are still far apart. Dr. Bennett says the first baby often takes its time." Nevertheless, Jackson insisted on helping her to their bedroom, where Mrs. Rodriguez had already prepared everything they might need. The hours that followed tested them, both Zara, with the physical ordeal of bringing their child into the world, and Jackson with the helplessness of watching his beloved wife in pain he could not ease. As the sun began to set, Dr. Bennett arrived, bringing a calm efficiency to the increasingly tense situation. "You're doing wonderfully, Mrs. Flint," he assured Zara after examining her. "Not much longer now." Jackson refused to leave her side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement and love. When Dr. Bennett finally instructed her to push, Jackson's support never wavered, even as Zara crushed his fingers with strength he hadn't known she possessed. And then, as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, a new cry joined the chorus of night sounds, strong, indignant, and perfect. "A daughter," Dr. Bennett announced, placing the squalling infant on Zara's chest. "A beautiful, healthy daughter." Zara's exhaustion vanished as she gazed down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the miniature fingers already curling around her own. "Jackson, look," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Look what we made." Jackson seemed incapable of speech. He reached out a trembling hand to touch his daughter's cheek, his expression one of absolute wonder. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "She's perfect. You're both perfect." After the baby had been cleaned, weighed, and swaddled, and Zara had been made comfortable, Dr. Bennett took his leave, promising to return in the morning. Mrs. Rodriguez brought tea and toast for the new mother before tactfully withdrawing, leaving the little family to their privacy. "What shall we name her?" Jackson asked, perched carefully on the edge of the bed, his daughter cradled in his large hands with surprising skill. They had discussed names but had not settled on any, wanting to meet their child first. Zara studied the small face, already showing hints of Jackson's strong features tempered by her own softer ones. "Caroline," she suggested softly, "after your sister who didn't have anyone to stand up for her. So she'll always know she comes from strength and resilience." Jackson's eyes glistened. "Caroline," he repeated, testing the name. "Caroline Elizabeth Flint." He looked to Zara for approval of the middle name, her own mother's name. "It's beautiful," Zara agreed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Welcome to the world, Caroline Elizabeth." As if recognizing her name, the baby opened her eyes newborn blue, but with a hint of what might become her father's intense green, and gazed solemnly up at her parents. "She has your serious expression," Zara teased gently. "And your curiosity," Jackson countered, noting how the infant's eyes moved between them. "She's going to be as intelligent as her mother. And as kind as her father," Zara added, reaching out to caress his cheek. "Thank you, Jackson." He looked puzzled. "For what? For giving me this life, this love, this family." She gestured to encompass the three of them, this perfect circle they had created. "When I think of how differently things might have turned out." Jackson leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to her lips. No more thoughts of what might have been, only what is and what will be. In the days that followed, news of Caroline's birth spread through Copper Creek. Visitors came bearing gifts and well wishes, including Reverend Miller, who blessed the child, and several of Zara's students, who were fascinated by the tiny human their teacher had produced. Even Eliza Marsh paid a call, bringing a surprisingly thoughtful gift of a hand-embroidered christening gown. Time and the evidence of Zara and Jackson's genuine affection had softened the older woman's attitude, though she would never admit to having been wrong about their hasty marriage. "She has your eyes, Mr. Flint," Eliza observed, peering at the baby with uncharacteristic gentleness. "And perhaps Miss Daniels Mrs. Flint's chin." "We think so too," Zara replied, choosing graciousness over grudges. As Eliza prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "I may have misjudged the situation. Last year," she said stiffly, "the child is clearly a blessing to you both." It was as close to an admission of error as they were likely to get. Jackson, standing protective and proud beside Zara's chair, simply nodded. "She is indeed." After Eliza's departure, Zara looked up at her husband with a smile. That must have cost her dearly. Less than the damage to her reputation if she had continued to snub the Flint family, Jackson replied practically, but with a twinkle in his eye. "We are, after all, the largest donors to the Church Restoration Fund." Zara laughed, jostling Caroline, who was nursing contentedly. "You're using your influence for good, I see, always." He knelt beside her chair, his expression growing serious. "Zara, I want you to know. These past months, being your husband and now a father, it's more than I ever dreamed possible for myself. For me as well," she said softly. "When I came to Copper Creek after my father died, I thought teaching would be my only purpose. I never imagined I could have this kind of happiness." Jackson's hand came to rest gently on his daughter's head. "I promise you both, I will spend every day of my life ensuring you never regret choosing this life with me." "I could never regret it," Zara assured him. "Not for a single moment." As if to confirm her mother's words, Caroline released a contented sigh in her sleep. Her tiny hand curled trustingly around her father's finger. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The Flint Ranch prospered under Jackson's careful management, expanding to become one of the most successful operations in the territory. Zara had returned to teaching as promised, though now she taught from a dedicated schoolroom Jackson had built on their property, open to the children of their ranch hands as well as any others willing to make the journey from town. Caroline, now a spirited 5-year-old with her father's green eyes and her mother's honey-blonde curls, was the joy of their lives. She shadowed Jackson around the ranch, already showing an aptitude for horsemanship that made him burst with pride, and devoured the books Zara read to her with an insatiable curiosity. She was no longer an only child. 2 years after her birth, Zara had given Jackson a son, Thomas Jackson Flint, named for Zara's father and his own. At 3, Thomas was already showing signs of inheriting his father's quiet strength and his mother's compassion. And now, as Zara stood on the porch watching Jackson teach Caroline to rope a practice steer, her hand rested on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their third child grew. She hadn't told Jackson yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news, but Dr. Bennett had confirmed her suspicions the previous day. "Mama, look," Caroline called, successfully looping her small rope around the wooden steer's horns. "I did it, wonderful darling." Zara called back, smiling at the picture they made her tall, handsome husband kneeling beside their daughter, his face alight with pride. Thomas toddled out from behind her skirts where he'd been hiding, his dark curls bouncing as he ran toward his father and sister. "Me too, me rope too." Jackson scooped him up with one arm, settling the boy on his shoulders. "When you're a bit bigger, partner. For now, you can be my lookout. Tell me if you see any rustlers coming." Thomas took this responsibility with utmost seriousness, shading his eyes with one small hand as he scanned the horizon. "No rustlers, Papa." Zara's heart swelled as she watched them, this family they had created from what had begun as a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation. What a blessing that false rumor had turned out to be. That evening, after the children were asleep, Zara and Jackson sat together on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder as they watched the stars emerge. These quiet moments together were precious, a chance to connect after busy days filled with ranch work, teaching, and parenting. "I received a letter from Caroline today," Jackson said, referring to his sister in Denver. "She and Edward are planning to visit next month with the children." "That's wonderful," Zara replied, genuinely pleased. She had grown close to her sister-in-law over the years, united by their love for Jackson and their shared experiences as mothers. The children will be thrilled to see their cousins. Jackson nodded, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Caroline mentioned that Edward has business interests near Copper Creek. They're considering relocating. Really? Zara sat up, surprised and delighted. That would be marvelous, having family nearby. I thought so too. Jackson hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about building them a house on the north section of our property. It's good land, with that view of the mountains Caroline always admired. Zara smiled at her husband's thoughtfulness. She'll be touched by the offer. She paused, deciding this was the perfect moment. Speaking of building things, I think we might need to consider expanding the nursery. It took a moment for her meaning to register. When it did, Jackson's expression transformed from confusion to joy. Zara, are you saying? She nodded, taking his hand and placing it over her stomach. Dr. Bennett says the baby should arrive in early spring, just in time for the wildflowers. Jackson pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion of a man still deeply in love with his wife after 6 years of marriage. Another child, he murmured against her lips. I am truly the most fortunate of men. We're both fortunate, Zara corrected, as she always did. Who would have thought that Eliza Marsh's malicious gossip would lead to such happiness? Jackson chuckled, his hand still resting protectively over their unborn child. Perhaps we should name this one after her as a gesture of thanks. Zara playfully swatted his arm. Don't even joke about such a thing. Can you imagine calling our sweet baby Eliza, perhaps as a middle name? He suggested, eyes twinkling. Not even then, Zara declared firmly. But speaking of names, I was thinking, if it's a girl, perhaps Abigail after your mother. Jackson's expression softened. She would have loved that, and if it's a boy. I thought we might let Caroline and Thomas help choose, Zara suggested. They're so excited about being a big sister and brother. A fine idea, Jackson agreed, though we may end up with a son named after Thomas's favorite horse. Thunderbolt Flint does have a certain ring to it, Zara teased, laughing at Jackson's mock horrified expression. As their laughter subsided, they fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of shared experiences and deep understanding. The night air was cool but not cold, fragrant with the scent of pine and sage. From inside the house came the occasional creak of settling timber, the home they had built together both literally and figuratively. Do you ever wonder, Jackson asked softly, what would have happened if I hadn't spoken up that day? Zara considered the question. Sometimes I might have had to leave Copper Creek, start over somewhere else. And I would have lost my chance at happiness, Jackson concluded, his voice thick with emotion. I thank God every day that I found the courage to claim you, even under such circumstances. As do I, Zara replied, reaching up to touch his face, still as handsome to her as the day he had strode through the crowd to declare, if she carries, it's mine. Though I maintain you would have found the courage to deliver that carefully practiced courtship speech eventually. Perhaps. He smiled down at her, love evident in every line of his face. But I prefer the way our story unfolded, dramatic beginning and all. As do I, Zara agreed, settling back against his chest. As do I. As the night deepened around them, stars scattered like diamonds across the vast Colorado sky, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a scandalous rumor to a marriage of convenience to this deep, abiding love that only grew stronger with each passing year. Life in the Wild West was unpredictable, often difficult, but it had given her everything she could have wished for: a loving husband, beautiful children, a home filled with warmth and purpose. What had begun as the worst day of her life had led to its greatest blessing. And as Jackson's arms tightened around her, his lips pressing a gentle kiss to her temple, Zara knew with absolute certainty that their story, imperfect, unexpected, but ultimately beautiful, was far from over. It was still being written, day by day, moment by moment, in the love they shared and the family they had created together. In the years to come, there would be more children, more challenges, more triumphs and trials. Copper Creek would grow from a frontier settlement into a proper town. Their children would grow up, forge their own paths, perhaps even write their own love stories. But the foundation of it all would remain unchanged: a false rumor, a courageous claim, and two hearts that found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along.